So you've made the big decision of which army is going to be your very first army. What's the next big question? Welcome back to Miniature Journey. Today I've made the big decision of what my first army is going to be. It's going to be the Lizardmen. Not their name currently, but that's how I know them. I remember these guys when they first came out and they were the Lizardmen. So that's what we're going with. But we do have a big decision to make. What colour scheme are we going to go for? Now there's many colour schemes. I've looked online. A few of them are popping up on screen now. I did see this one, which is done on a skink, and I thought it would be really nice to do our Saurus warriors like that. So we're going to try this colour scheme out today. If it does work, great. We've got a basic colour scheme for the Saurus warriors. Then we've got to just sort of decide in the future what colour scheme we're going to do for the skinks, which is going to sort of complement that. But first off, let's try and get this done. As always, I've base coated the model in a Chaos Black Citadel paint, and now we're just going over putting our base coats on. So base coating, fairly straightforward. I've gone with dark colours that represent what I want it to look like as it gets lighter. So we've started with heavy sienna on the underside and a mix of heavy blue and Waterlord purple for the top side. So I haven't actually got a purple in my collection, so I had to make one. So I used the heavy blue and the Warlord purple. And that's going to be the two base coats for this model. Once this is done, we're going to build up the underside of the skin with a much lighter colour. We're going to go with cadmium skin to start with, because I wanted to add a bit of warmth into it. We're going to end up with like a bone white eventually, but I wanted that warmth to come through from the cadmium skin. And that's going to take a couple of coats over this dark sienna, but I'm okay with that. Heavy sienna. I said dark. You know what I meant. There's something very satisfying about the purple scales here. I really enjoyed painting these. When I first put this first coat on, completely one solid purple, I was a bit like, not sure on that. But as it went along, it came together really nicely. And then we're going to add like a lovely, I say lovely. Some people might think this is horrendous, but I really like it. The pink, the spikes all the way running down the back, just give that pop of colour. So you've got the very light underbelly, the purple back, and then that pink running along the back. Sort of reminds me of animals in the wild, especially like frogs and lizards and that. If they're poisonous or something, they tend to have quite a bright colour on them as a warning to other animals. Don't eat me or you're going to be like really ill. And that's my thinking behind this. Once all the base coating's done, we're going to start building up that cadmium skin underneath. Now I'm going with cadmium before the bone white because I want it to bring in a bit of warmth into the underbelly. Don't want it to appear too pale and washed out. And cadmium's got quite a pinkish hue to it, so I think that should shine through nicely. It is going to take 2 to 3 coats of this because you want to keep the paint fairly thin. And then we're going to put a quick wash on the underside. I'm going to put a sepia wash underneath, and we're going to use a black wash on top, and it's just to sink in to all those creases, bringing out all the details. That's because we lost a bit of the detail, and a wash works so well when you use it correctly. The more I use washes, the more I like them. This is a black wash, and I've used this later on this model. But if you use them correctly, not like I have done in the past, they work really nicely. The underside of our model is coming alive with those washes. It sits in all the creases, and then once you put the highlighting on, it looks beautiful. I'm really happy with how the underside of this model's turned out. And part of it is down to the washes. So I'm definitely going to be playing around with these more in the future. and hopefully learning how to use them better. So after letting the wash dry completely, we're going back in with the purple, the mix of the heavy blue and the warlock purple, and just picking out those scales again. So you end up with a really dark purple, because the black wash has made it really dark now, as you can see, in the crevices, and then the scales themselves bring that purple back into them. It is a time-consuming job, but it's so worth it. It makes it feel like individual scales rather than just one plain matte colour. And I have to admit, I really enjoy painting these. The model itself has an odd tendency of the scales being random. So if you look on the right hand side of the spine, they're quite big scales. Well, if you look on the left hand side of the spine, they're really small scales. I actually prefer the bigger scales running down the back leading into the smaller ones, but it doesn't have that on the left. I find that quite odd. It might be like niggling at me that it's not the same on both sides. Like my brain's going, why is it not the same? But I suppose that adds to the randomness of the scales. And as you can see here, by bringing that purple back out again, it's really making those scales stand out. Obviously, while the paint's wet, it's still very light and it will die down a little bit. It will darken down as it dries. I think the hardest scales to paint are as you get down to the tail, because they get so small. Trying to pick out each individual one is a little bit difficult. And I think at times I pick out more than one because I sort of moving my brush too close to the model. And as you see, I pick up more than, it almost looks like I paint the entire tail, but I don't. It still works out fine. And because they're raised so much, you don't actually have to be that careful at this point. As long as you're keeping your brush fairly at a good distance, it will automatically pick up those raised areas for you. Then we're going to go through with a bone white and pick out the highlights. Start picking out the highlights on the underside. Now I know obviously it's underneath the creature, so the sun's not going to be getting it to that much. But I'm almost picking out the raised areas of skin, especially across the chest where you've got the chest pieces. You'll pick out the pecs, do all of those, and then the six pack underneath, you do the bottom of each muscle. So you've still got that darker area defining the muscles, and then the lighter area catching from what light is getting underneath. And it also helps to take away that dirty effect you get. Like the Sapir wash does its job beautifully. I'm a little in love with it, but it does leave almost a dirty feel to it. So going through with this fresh bone white here, it's just tying it all back in together. It's not. It almost felt like the Lizardman had swam through a swamp first, which it might have done. I think I go for quite a swampy effect on the base at the end of this. Only because I've only got one set of plants from Gamer's Grass, and I haven't got any jungle ones at the moment. Otherwise, the jungle base would be perfect for this. So going forward with the rest of the army, I'm probably going to go jungle base, and I'm a little excited to get my hands on some of their 3D printed plants, especially for the jungle feel. Just working my way down the tail, picking out each individual part and leaving the dark areas in between. And the paint does all this for you, as long as you're picking out the bits you think are correct. And again, I'm still learning on this. We as humans always picture how light hits something differently to how it actually does. And obviously, depending on what angle you're looking at it from, also depends how the light hits it. So what I can say is just imagine it from one view and work from there. Don't try, because it gets very confusing if you think from all angles. Think from the front. That's the majority of the time, that's where people are going to be looking at it from. They're going to be looking at the face and that. So think of the light coming from that light. That's where you're viewing the light from. I remember when I was starting thinking of reflections first off. Reflections
very much change on an item depending where you're looking at it from. And I was like, how am I supposed to paint that? And once I got it out of my head that I didn't have to cover every angle, it made life a lot easier. In this case, we're going to use metallic paints for the first time on the channel. I don't think I've used metallic paints yet.
I've realised we got a theme going on the channel. So one video seems to lead into another one. So we had the goblins, and those goblins led into the next video, which was the goblin spider riders. And those goblin spider riders seem to have led into this video because I used these two colours a lot. The warlord purple and the squid pink. And they've made a comeback on our Lizardmen. Bit odd. Wonder where we're going to go from here.
At this point, I'm just going through with the original purple mix. I'm putting a few spots where the upper scales meet the lower part of the body, just to give a bit better transition. And I think it works beautifully. I think it'll work even more beautifully once my brush control has improved more, but I was really happy with how these turned out. Just random dots every now and again around where the top meets the bottom. I know here it appears like I'm doing the same thing I've already done by highlighting the underside, but I did actually, before I put the spots on, put another sepia wash on, which worked really nicely because you had the lighter colour that I'd already put on coming through that sepia wash. So it gave the transition a much better, cleaner look rather than the dirty look. So now I'm just going across and reconfirming those highlights. So yeah, I think 2 washes was a good plan here. I sort of took a chance and went, is this going to ruin it? Is it not going to ruin it? Who knows? Now it comes time to highlight our scales. So we're going to take our original mix of purple and we're going to add a little bit of squid pink just to lighten it up a bit, and then we're going to go along and we're going to paint each scale probably somewhere around 30% of the top of the scale. And I'm going to go over all the scales I've done before, covering 30% of the top of the scale so it looks like the light's hitting the top of the scale. And this works really nicely. I think off camera I actually go through with squid pink, pure squid pink, and then cover probably 10% of the scale, so it's almost like a tiny edge highlight on each scale. And with that, I'm only picking out the scales that I think are in direct light, so very much along the back in that, but any sort of tucked around the edges didn't get that.
Just to ease the transition between the very purple back of our Lizardman and the very pale underside, I wanted to almost make that transition a bit less harsh. So we've just added a few dots here and there of the dark purple, and it's really giving it that transition. Once I get better brush control and things like that, the dots will be a lot more smaller and more precise. But even at my level of skill, it definitely made a difference. You don't have that harsh line. Those tiny little purple dots just give you that transition. So I would highly recommend, if you're doing a Lizardman army, try it. See what you think.
So at this point we start to add our final details, and it's at this point the footage got a bit lost because the phone must have moved on the stand or something. Up to this point I thought I was doing quite well with capturing the footage, and then this all seemed to be off to the side. So we've got little bits and pieces. We go along the back of the spine, just painting the single row of spines with the very bright warlord purple. And I think it stands out so well. I even tried to get like a almost stripe effect across the top of the head. We've also got all the metal to paint up, and Lizardmen are known for gold, but I didn't want pure solid gold, so we've mixed gunmetal with glorious gold in equal measures, and then put a black wash over the top. And it just dulled it down a little bit, but still was metallic.
And there we have it. One finished Lizardman. It took me ages, and that's an issue. Because if I'm painting an entire army of these, we may need to find a quicker way. One of the ways we can do it is because I've mixed the purple up myself. I used Warlord purple and the blue, as I said. We could probably buy a ready mixed paint, which is about the colour we want. That is one way of doing it. I've made a list of how I've done this. So going forward, when I'm doing my models, it should be fairly straightforward to stick to this. I would like to alter, like sort of change the shades of the purple every now and again, just so not every model is the same. Because that's natural. They wouldn't all be exactly the same colour, exactly the same shade. So mixing that up just slightly should help. But yeah, I need to find a quicker way of painting these things. But that's all for now. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, hit that like button, and if you haven't done already, please subscribe. It does help the channel. And until next time, I'll see you again.